my prediction is in a minute, okay? I got to get into this. The world
is on the decline. Almost every other team in the league has had to face severe financial cutbacks. Not only have players been asked to accept less, but even the league commissioner, Doug Mitchell, has taken a salary cut of 40%. Can the CFL achieve a financial turnover and head towards Grey Cup 100? Or are we experiencing the death throes of this proud old league? To discuss the future of the CFL, our guests tonight on Crossfire are Joe Galat, the general manager of the BC Lions, and former Calgary Stampeder and author of the book Third and Long, Willie Thomas. Our panel, J. Paul McConnell, CBC Television Sports Vancouver, and Allan Maki, sports columnist with the Calgary Herald. Crossfire will return in a moment.
There's nothing wrong with the Canadian Football League because it's exciting, it's entertaining, but the problem is they've got that image, and everybody looks on them as a real minor league.
They're not getting the support they deserve.
We got to get some more public backing into it. We got to get some more sponsors. Obviously, the money's not where it should be.
I think the product's all right. It's just they need to get the fans there.
Joe Galat, about a season or two ago, when Doug Mitchell was on this show, he gave me a rather bad time for suggesting the league was in trouble. He thought it was media pessimism, but since then there's been some pretty dramatic evidence of that. How much trouble is the league in? Will it collapse? And if it did, how much do you think Canadians would care?
Well, I guess number one, the league is in financial concern. I don't know if that's always interpreted as trouble, but I think most of the focus this year has been off the field rather than on the field, and the problem with that being that we've got some excellent football players out there. We've had some great ball games this year. Would the Canadians really care? I think there's a large number of Canadians that would care, those that follow the game, not just at the ball games, but those that follow the game in the newspapers and on TV. So I think it would have a dramatic impact on the Canadian mentality.
But not enough are watching the game, surely, Willie. What's your answer to the same question? How to get people back? What is the danger?
Well, I was recently, on a CBC phone-in show, and by far, 75% of the people that phoned in said that they were concerned about the CFL and it was worth saving. Their whole impetus behind their argument was, can the CFL come and touch me, the guy on the street? And then I think that's the kind of thing we've got to get back to. I mean, if it involves getting on the back of trains and shaking hands with people on the street and getting them into the ballpark, then that's where we've got to go.
Paul.
Joe, it seems to me that after last Sunday, you're not going to want to talk about last season at all. You would like to talk about the future. It seems to me that the Canadian Football League has its very own forum here during Grey Cup week between now and Sunday, where it has to say something positive to the fans to make people know that the league's going to be back, that things are going to be well. Are they going to be able to do that?
I think so. I think that's the big thing that we have to do, JP, is to come out and be 8 solid football teams and have a plan that will ensure that 8 football teams are going to thrive in 1988. And I think part of those plans are already in place, and hopefully we'll be able to finalize the rest of it and come out with it this week.
But what are you going to do here this week to excite the Canadian public about your game?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that we can do. The number one thing that we have to do, I think, is to take care of the product that's on the field, and I think that's being done. The number two thing is to show stability, the financial stability, so that the attention is taken off the finances, the attention is taken off the legal hassles with the players' agreement and things of that nature. We got to get back to what the fans want to see and what they want to participate in. I think it should be a fun thing, and it hasn't been fun this year, and I think that's what Willie was saying. We've got to touch the fans. We've got to let them have fun.
Willie, it's been said in other leagues that the lifeblood of any sport is the players and the way the fans identify with them. Has the CFL done a good enough job marketing its players and promoting the star players?
Well, that's a tricky question. You've got star players that are not articulate human beings sometimes. I mean, those are not the kind of people, in some instances, that you want to be sending out into the community to promote your company or your ball club. But on whole, no, the CFL hasn't done that. I mean, I don't know that every team, and they should have, has a speakers bureau where players are trained to speak and entertain folks, armed with a number of seasons tickets in which they can sell and bring people into the park. That hasn't been
But,
done.
you know, just to pick up on that, where are the Gretzkys of football? I mean, this problem has existed for you people who run teams for a long time, you know, that are trying to get more public interest to the creation of stars. You don't have those stars.
Well, I mean, you're talking about a chicken and egg situation now. I mean, is Wayne Gretzky anybody if not for the exposure that Wayne Gretzky gets? I mean, you can be an excellent football player, but if the media and certain people within the league dramatize that fact and expose it to the fan, then you are a superstar. I mean,
But
it's
don't
all a
superstars sell
creation.
tickets, though? Isn't that what the problem is?
Superstars do sell tickets, but I mean, so can the average guy in the street. If you've, I mean, we're talking about a perception problem here, aren't we? The league is having a perception problem. You can't change a perception problem unless you deal with where those people live, and that's upstairs. And how you do that is through media.
Following on that, then, how do you keep the superstars when some of the things that are going on at the meetings here this week is the discussion of the plan of how much they're going to cut the players' salaries and how many of the players are going to stay or go?
Yeah, there's the million-dollar question. I mean, we've got a situation where how did we attract top-quality import players to this league initially? We didn't offer them multi-million-dollar salaries. We offered them the opportunity to work in the community, some stability, bring your family up. What are you doing in Biloxi, Mississippi anyway? Why don't you live in Calgary, Alberta? And we can provide a life for you. We can't give you $500,000 a year, but we can offer you some stability. Now we can't do that. We don't have 4 o'clock practices anymore. Those guys cannot get jobs in the community. And I think we're feeling the effects of it right now.
Joe, when you look at that comment, do teams, when they have their budgets in front of them, say, maybe this is an area we can save some money, we'll cut out on public relations or media relations, can we cut out here and save some money here that we can use elsewhere? And has that, again, come back to haunt the league?
Yeah, I think it has. I think there's no question that some people in the league don't feel as though that the public relations, marketing, and those areas are as important as the players' salaries or things of that nature. And I think everything is important. As Willie alluded to, we've got to get back to where the players are part of the community, where they have an opportunity to get a job. I think that's the other concession that we've got to have. We've got, as managers and as people who run this league, we've got to let the players become part of the community, start the practices later. We've got to start training camp later and give them opportunities to have a life, not just a 6-month career and then go back to the States.
You know, the interesting thing about this, what we're talking about now we've got a situation where the Players Association has been dictated to by the commissioner. You've got a $3 million pay cap. We got guys going into a team and saying, are you willing to take a pay cut? Well, this is the bottom line. We're all going to have to take a pay cut here. Now you've got imports that are sitting in the bench. They do not have a vested interest in this league, per se, because we've created them to be such transients. They're saying, hey, I'm not so sure I'm willing to take a pay cut. I do not understand the CFL. I don't have a vested interest in it. I do not live full-time in Edmonton or Regina or whatever. And now you've got a real paradox happening.
But wasn't just what you said, though, doesn't that focus attention on the non-Canadian nature of football in Canada? Is this a problem? You talk about perceptions. Is it perceived by more and more Canadians as really an American sport?
Well, I think so, but I mean, that's not an irrevocable problem. We had in the old days, I mean, you talk about Ronnie Lancaster. Yeah. And a lot of people think Ronnie Lancaster, well, what a great Canadian guy. But he's not a Canadian. I mean, he came up from the States. I'd like to see it where Americans that were come up here and offered a certain stability in this league were made Canadians on the roster, you know, to further facilitate that stability.
What about that, Joe? Or do Canadians see it as an American sport rather than a Canadian sport? Is that the problem, or part of the problem?
Maybe it's just the reverse. They don't see it as much. The Canadian Football League isn't perceived with the same esteem, I guess, as the National Football League. And I think there again we're back to the product and how it's sold and how it's marketed. But there's no question, if we proposed the BC Lions last year that any person being a landed immigrant who would play for one ball club more than 5 years be considered a non-import. And it was tabled and will be brought up at our next Management Council meeting. But those are the things that we have to do to get the perception of the Canadian Football League as a quality product and the players who play in it are more identifiable.
All you have to do is take a look at the Edmonton Eskimos team that's going to be on the field here on Sunday afternoon. They have 3 imports on offense. Matt Dunnigan with Brian Kelly and that other gentleman named Jones.
Yeah.
The rest are Canadians. It is the finest example in the game of Canadian football, Gil Fennerty, who will win the Shenley.
And with their homes in Edmonton, most of those fellas live and work and are part of the community, and I think that helps.
But the league doesn't tell people that.
That's what we're working on now, and I think one of those proposals that we made was to just simply do that, to consider people non-imports once they've spent some time in the community. We said 5 years, but that's an arbitrary figure.
Joe, there's been a lot of talk as well about Americanizing Canadian football, either through rules or taking it into the States to expansion. How viable is that? I mean, will the Canadians buy that because it's simply a U.S. label attached to it?
Well, I think that would be a very grave mistake to make the Canadian Football League just like the National Football League, because I don't think we can do it. I don't think it's as interesting and exciting as the Canadian Football League. We are supposed to be a wide-open, exciting, three-down football style. And what we've done is we've taken some of those rules and made us less what we really are, because the Canadian Football League is a faster tempo, it's a better game. And I've coached in the National Football League, I've been on the sidelines, and I think we see it, the production of it, and we think it's so great. But when you're in those cities and seeing those teams play, it's not all that special, but it's just sold in a better way.
But have you not advocated that maybe the CFL should try 11-man football or try a spice of some of the American rules?
11-man football, yes, because of the salary problems and that type of thing. Because the field is wider, less players would make it even more exciting. But never 4 downs, and never get into the scenario where we're trying to duplicate what the National Football League does, because that's just not what we're all about.
But you have asked that they move the hash marks in to be parallel with the goalposts,
there again,
so that you take the advantage away from the defense.
Yeah, there again, the same idea, JP, is to get our offense. We are supposed to be a wide-open style of attack. Our offenses are supposed to score points. And you just look at the 2 playoff games. 2 of the top teams in the league got defensed extremely well, Winnipeg and BC. I don't think it was very entertaining for Winnipeg. It wasn't very entertaining for the BC fans. I would like to see more offense put into play, and I think we can do that with just a subtle change in some rules.
Do you expect to lose more teams?
No, I don't think so. You know, the old argument is that the NHL survived with 6 teams and did well. I don't think so. I think we have to go into it with 8 teams, and I think someday we'll get back into Montreal and we'll have a good ball club there as well.
But you know, you guys have been saying the same as Doug Mitchell said on this program again a season or 2 ago, that he knew what the problems were and knew what needed to be done. And you're saying exactly the same thing, but not much has improved. In fact, the situation has deteriorated since. I mean, what hope for success do you have, really? You know what to do, but can you really get Canadians on side?
No, I mean, I take exception with you there, Ron. I don't believe that Doug Mitchell knew what the problems were. I think that the attitude with a lot of, with Doug and some of the GMs was, and it still is today, and I read the paper like the average fan on the streets. Don't tell me that there is a problem in the CFL. Don't give me this negative image. Let's emphasize the positive. Well, to me, that's like hiding your head in the sand. Let's find out what the problems are, document them, and then admit. Let's just admit for a moment that we're all in this together. And I'm talking the players, the management, and the press, the CFL Players Relations Committee headed by Doug Mitchell and certain GMs, that we're all in this together, otherwise we're going to be covering lawn bowling. And once we get to that point, and not a moment before, will we start to address the problems that are in this league.
I think you misunderstood me. I'm saying Doug Mitchell had some very positive ideas on what needed to be done. That's what I'm saying. And you guys today have some very positive ideas about what needs to be done now. But why hasn't it been done in the meantime? You know, and the situation, in fact, has deteriorated, isn't it?
Well, I don't think it's being done.
No.
I don't think it's being done. We've got a $3 million salary cap, and that's the extent of it. We've got some impetus happening about looking for new franchises in the United States, and I'm from Missouri. You know, show me.
Okay.
If that's going to happen, great. But I want to know why, when there was a collapse of the Montreal Alouettes, why I went and I had a hamburger at some place, and some woman came to me and offered me $1,000 to get that franchise started. I mean, somebody that was selling hot dogs. Mm-hmm. And I think that the person on the street is he's not being consulted. He doesn't know what's going on. Because you can't sell 1,000 tickets to Kraft or Esso or Dome Petroleum, does that mean that there's no interest in your town in Canadian football? I've been across Canada promoting my book, and that's not the case.
No,
the people are very, very into what's going on in the CFL.
I think we can all agree that the death wish of the Canadian Football League, or the worst news possible, was when Montreal went down. Willie knows better than anybody. He was there.
Yeah, there's no question, and I agree with Willie on one side, and I disagree with him on the other side. I think what we have to do is have a front-up acknowledgement of what's going on. But then we also have to sell the media on what we are doing. What are we doing about it? How are we getting to the fans? So certainly saying, and I agree with you, certainly saying that we have a $3 million cap doesn't solve the problem. But what solves the problem is to get to the people, get back to the fans, and give them what they want. I think they want to meet the players with their helmets off. They want to know, it's got to be personal. They want to know who the guy is that they're cheering for.
Well, you know, Joe, and I'm going to ask, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to ask the general manager in Winnipeg, does that cost a lot of money? I mean, I was in Brandon just probably 3 weeks ago, and I'm there doing the 3 media spots in Brandon, the newspaper, the 2 television stations, a radio station. And I said to them, did you guys see the Grey Cup when Winnipeg won it? The answer was no. I mean, they're an hour and a half from town. They've got a high school football team that's doing the best they've ever done in history. Has anybody from the Bombers come to Brandon, which is an hour and a half away, a great market for you to bring people into the stadium, and we know you're having problems? The answer is no. Those are, I mean, what are we talking about here? $26, I think it's $14.50 to go one way to Brandon and come back. To get people there, and the media is enormous. I mean, the impression you make on a small town like that is like forever.
I think you're right. However, everybody isn't promoting a book. A lot of ball players think that their job is to go out and play the football game and then to go home and enjoy their families. And you've been there, Willie. You know that you can only get a limited number of those players out. We've had, here at the Lions, we're fortunate. We've had 1,500 player appearances last year. And our ball players realize the value of the communities. But
and your ticket sales went down 10,000 a game.
And our ticket sales still went down. And, of course, that's another story with the scheduling. But I've been in communities and I've been in ball clubs where they simply refuse to go out. And it's usually the ones who are getting the most money that won't go out and do the public relations. So it's a catch-22 there as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is no way that any team can tolerate an individual that will not go out and be a force for the survival of that club. I mean, if Tom Clemens will not go to Brandon, Manitoba, I, as a manager, want to know, okay, why, Tom Clemens, won't you go out to Brandon, Manitoba? You're not going to practice law in Chicago this weekend. Brandon, Manitoba is an hour and a half away. We will pay you if that's a problem. Is it $300 that you want? Go to Brandon, Manitoba, and we can reap some benefits here. If he won't go and do it, then certainly we can pick somebody that will.
Okay, Allan Maki has a question for you.
Some of the complaints from the average fan is that the CFL management, the power structure, has been a sort of self-perpetuating group. They're interested in looking after themselves. This club needs a general manager. We'll bring back Ralph Sazio or Leo Cahill. We need Earl Lunsford back. We have the same people calling the shots who were doing it in 1960 or trying to do it again in 1980. Does the CFL have the men of vision to take it out of this period?
Well, I think that's the key. I guess that time will tell. I would like to think that we've got some people not only on the Management Council but on the Board of Governors that are far-reaching in their concept and what they would like to get done in this league.
You have, I think, Joe, taken in some respect the fans for granted. Maybe not so much in BC this year, but in Edmonton, for example, the semi-final game, which is the ideal matchup. It's Calgary coming to Edmonton, the big Battle of Alberta, everything. 12,000 season ticket holders in Edmonton renewed for the playoff game. The rest, which is another 17,000, stayed home. You seem to take the playoff games for granted. The game here last Sunday had 40-some-odd thousand people there. The last time they had a game like that in BC Place, there was 60,000. You just expect people to show up to see your game.
Well, I don't know if that's fair criticism, JP, because there certainly was, number one, information that there was a ball game. I think full-page ads in the newspapers and a lot of hype on television. So we probably have to look at some of the other things that we've just talked about. How do we get the fans personally involved, and how do we get them to feel that whatever happens out on that field is very important. It was important to the media last week. We had good coverage. It was important certainly to the ball players, but somehow to the majority of the people it wasn't as important as it has been in the past.
Does it cost?
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Ron. Is it cost? You're asking Vancouver fans this week to spend $24 and $60, $84 to go to 2 football games in 6 days. It's too much money, maybe?
Well, we've done some surveys, and we'll continue to do some surveys. It hasn't reflected yet that the cost has been a factor.
Okay, now I think everyone here wants the CFL to succeed and be very, very healthy, and we've got into some of the ways that you've suggested that might get you through to the 100th year. Could you be more specific, though? You talk about meeting the players and that sort of thing. That's pretty general stuff. What else can you do to fill those stadiums?
Well, the BC Lions have embarked on a program that we call Lion Backers, and it is simply a process of going out and being involved in the community. It's our community relations wing. We've got a great number of our ball players now speaking to youngsters on the topic of drug education. We've worked very hard in amateur football, and hopefully those kinds of things, along with a solid marketing plan, will be what it takes to get people interested.
Have drugs in sports turned people away from football, do you think?
Well, no question. When you talk about drugs in sports, you talk about salaries and disputes that are brought out in public. I think those kinds of things that take the... I get letters from the common guy on the street, and he says, look, I don't want to hear about somebody that has to sacrifice and they're making $150,000. I don't want to hear about that. I don't want to hear about a guy who's got so much money he doesn't know whether to spend it on what drug. And so I think that's part of the problem, but that's really not the bottom line.
Sure. Is the CFL worth saving? Does
no question about it. I think the CFL is something that's very unique. I think it's a culture all of its own. I think you only have to look at the playoffs in university this year. Mm-hmm. Those fellas, I mean, they're just bigger and better, stronger, faster every year. And I think if anything that you can point to in the Canadian, in the country of Canada, would be the college players. They've just done a great job, and they're really coming along. And for them not to have an opportunity to play professional football, I think, would be a travesty.
I think you're saying, too, that players should individually be role models, too, and that would be very helpful, too, in terms of drugs and demanding more and more money for what they do. It's not much of a role model, is it?
Actually, we've got 95% of our players that are excellent role models. And
good. On that point, I've got to cut in. Thank you. Crossfire will return in a moment.
How would I say the CFL? Good question. Change 2 rules and make it a quicker paced game.
They've probably only got maybe another year, possibly 2 years at the very maximum to go. And that's it, because nobody cares.
I wouldn't save the CFL personally. I'd rather see an NFL team in any major city in Canada.
Well, let's not end this program on a downer. Let's set aside the cares about the future of the CFL and concentrate on the excitement of the game in Vancouver this weekend. It'll be a good one. It always is. I'd like to thank our panel tonight, J. Paul McConnell, CBC Television Sports Vancouver, and Allan Maki, sports columnist with the Calgary Herald. And of course, our guests tonight, Joe Galat, the general manager of the BC Lions, and former Calgary Stampeder and author of the book Third and Long, Willie Thomas. I'm Ron Collister for Crossfire in Vancouver. Good night.